New structure to the podcast a little bit here, so the intros will be a little bit longer. We have a breakdown of the last regular season game between the Pacers and the Thunder. I went back and watched it last night and this morning, not twice. Little carryover. Boy, I was tired after a terrible round of golf. But let's dig into it. There's no Chet, so that does change some things. But I do think there's two things. I'd say there's two specific things that I thought were really interesting on the OKC side of things. We're also going to talk with Bruce Feldman, who is on top of college football. I am less interested in college football right now because of the new playoff proposal and what that'll mean. And we're all going to fight about it and yell and say mean things. But Bruce and I are going to do that because we're friends and we've got life advice. I enjoyed this one today. You're listening to the Ryen Russillo podcast presented by FanDuel. America's #1 sportsbook has made it easier than ever to get in on the action during the NBA Finals. And with live betting, the tip-off is just the beginning. Look for the live SGP tab on the FanDuel Sportsbook app and build your bet slip. Then sit back and enjoy the game as you track the outcome of your parlay right in the app. If you don't already have it, download the FanDuel app today to make every moment more. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available and listen to the end of this episode for additional details. Must be 21 and older and present in select states or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. We're going to change the schedule around this week. Normal Tuesday, because you're listening, because it's Tuesday. And then we're going to do show number 2 this week on Friday after game 1 of the NBA Finals. It starts on Thursday night. So what I wanted to do, and I touched on this with Bill on Sunday's pod, is I wanted to go back and watch the Thunder hosting the Pacers back on March 29th. OKC won that game 132-111. Pacers had been on a roll, really closed the season strong. I think they closed 15-4. I don't know that anybody really was at OKC's level, but certainly you can go through all these different Pacers timelines of when they had the injuries, when they were, 9-14, 10-15, not having Nesmith for a couple months. But the matchup in this one, Chet had been on hip management, so he did not play in this game. So for OKC, there was no Chet. There was no Jalen Williams, too. They actually played Brandon Carlson and Dylan Jones in the first half, so it wasn't garbage time for them. And then Hartenstein left the game with a bit of a hip thing, but he was back 2 days later. And I was wondering if maybe they just shut him down at the half because it was something that the Pacers were definitely attacking, or maybe they were attacking because they didn't feel like he was responding well enough. So OKC went small in the second half. So just a few things to pick from here. I don't know how much it means, but let's go through it together, shall we? Defensive assignments for this one. On SGA was Nembhard. Dort had Siakam on him. Hartenstein had Turner on him. Wallace started because of no Chet, so Halliburton defended him, and then Nesmith was on Jalen Williams, number 1. On the other side of things, Halliburton had Dort on him. SGA defended Nembhard. Wallace was on Nesmith. Hartenstein actually defended Siakam. That was their preferred matchup. And then Jalen Williams, 1, defended their center and Miles Turner. Now, as we know over the course of the game, especially coming off of turnovers or misses a bunch of times, people end up with different people. But that seemed to be, as I would check it at other times, the general defensive assignment that they wanted to go through. And again, the no Chet thing makes some of this irrelevant. So the Pacers got up 10 early in this one, some good three-point shooting, and then they were down 22 2 quarters later. So going into the fourth, down 22 after being up 10 in the first. A couple themes from this. Felt like there was more Halliburton off the ball, which I just think is smart. And it's really simple, and some coaches don't do it. Some guards just don't do it. It could be on the guards to figure it out. It could be on the coaches. But if you're going up against a really good defense, especially when you're playing the same team in a row in a series like this, to just start at the top, and then just attack from the top and have the attack look the same all of the time and the other team getting used to your tendencies, it's really smart, and it makes it a lot easier for the guard or your best player, in this case with Halliburton, just try to start him off the ball. It seemed like something they were working with a little bit where, there was a lot of TJ, there was some Nembhard stuff. Halliburton ends up with the ball a ton to begin with, but just to have him come straight at you, high pick and roll, play it to one side over and over and over again, it becomes way too predictable. And SGA actually felt like he was off the ball a little bit more than he would be in some of the other series. So we've already talked about the benefit of how you can attack off of that stuff. If you're looking for this, it looked like Indiana wanted Hartenstein as much as possible. Like, it was a lot. Like, let's get into this. Let's switch into him. And I, at the time I had to go back and look that he was removed from hip soreness, because when they start Kenrich Williams in the second half, I was like, is there something there that they felt like they didn't like that approach, or is it just as simple as his hip was hurting him? But again, he did come back, play a couple games later, and so it wasn't really that big of a deal. So when they bench, or again, I shouldn't say bench, when Hartenstein leaves the game, doesn't come back in, they're starting the second half. OKC goes small with Kenrich Williams. Pacers immediately, first two possessions, first two touches, they want to go to Turner. It starts to look good, but I do think that OKC wants you to become that predictable. It's like, hey, we're going small, so now they're going to try to get it into their big guys, and we're going to make it tough on them with the entry passes. We're going to defend the passer so he doesn't get a clean passing lane, and then we're going to have somebody kind of sneak over a little bit because you think you have this size advantage, and now you're running your offense through Miles Turner, and we're swarming around him, so keep doing it if you want to. And once it looked like it was kind of a good matchup for the Pacers, nobody ever really does this anymore, even when they have the size mismatch in the post, because teams they just don't want to do that anymore in this league. But there was a pretty interesting scenario a few plays later where Siakam threw a lob into Turner, and it was just a way too casual regular season lob where OKC's like, awesome. It's like the safety running over. The corner has Turner. The safety comes running over with OKC's defense. That leads to a turnover. And then there was another play where Siakam got SGA into switch. So Siakam's like, cool, I'm going to work him. I'm going to post him, beast him up. And it's like, all right, but you can't do it too long against this Thunder defense, because you dick around in the paint, as we've talked about all season long. There's going to be another guy coming for you. And that led to a turnover there too. Without SGA, the Thunder actually did some nice damage in this game in some of the non-SGA minutes. So this is something that I will be looking for, and I don't think it has anything to do with Chet not playing, is Jalen Williams on the attack. He did not care. He was so aggressive in this game, and it was, I'd say, a little alarming for Nesmith, who you think body type-wise and because of his defensive abilities and his intent. I mean, Nesmith just plays at 100 miles an hour every single minute he's out there. Well, Williams didn't care. And it felt like he got him a bunch of possessions that I was tracking this one. Looking at it kind of in this second quarter stretch without having SGA in the game, he has him 3-point line right past him on the dribble, then gets him with a step back. Then he finishes against Siakam on the fast break and went at Siakam at the rim as he was going to the fast break. Then he shakes Nesmith with a dribble on the right side. He did miss that shot. Then it was another fast break against two defenders, one including Siakam, and he finishes against them. Third quarter against Nesmith, he gets him left side, full drive, and just gets side by side with him and just takes him and finishes right at the rim for the N1 and the finish. SGA had 33 points in this game, but he was only 6-18 in the first three quarters, had 12 free throw attempts, which isn't going to excite Pacers fans. But this was a really, of all the things I was looking for, wondering, are you going to get anything out of this exercise? That was something that was kind of all right, let's see. Is there something where Jalen Williams is like, hey, with my size and athleticism against Nesmith, where Nesmith can usually body up with a lot of other guys, it doesn't look like Jalen Williams cares about that at all. And he was very successful in the stuff that I was looking at there. So, we can look at some of the overall stats from this game. I don't know that it matters. Pacers actually took more free throws in this game. Rebounds are basically even. Pacers had a couple more turnovers. But I would say the most alarming part of this for the Pacers, and clearly I'm picking OKC, as most people are in this series, but the thing that we love about the Pacers, the thing that we loved about them in this Knicks series, where it just felt like there was that extra gear that the Knicks could not match with the Pacers, and getting out after makes, all of those times you're joking about, you think you're coming back from some commercial or something, or they show a replay, and it's like, you can't really do the cutaway shots with this team because they're moving the ball so quickly. In this game, OKC was the faster basketball team. They were pushing it more. They were pushing it after makes. They were getting 3-point attempts off of that push. They had a nice little Isaiah Joe run where he kind of put back-to-back threes together that really kind of spaced the game out. So if you're a Pacers fan just going, hey, we're fast, we're going to run with them, they're not going to be able, like, that's the one way, because I've heard that talked about. It just paced them to death, meaning OKC. In this game, back in March, OKC was faster, they were more aggressive, and that part should be a little concerning. Now, look, after watching playoff basketball for a month and a half, even this game with a great team in OKC and this Pacers team that had been playing really, really well now for months, it was a bit of a reminder of what regular season basketball looks like. You're like, oh, I hadn't watched a full regular season basketball game now in a month and a half. And after everything that we've watched and how great the Pacers have been and what OKC was able to do against Minnesota, you're like, okay, this does look like a different product here. And it was kind of jarring for a bit. Just a lack of intensity. Again, a little too casual, some of the passes. I think some of the stuff that certainly the Pacers will clean up. I don't think they're going to look like they did in some of the possessions that I saw from this game. Now, this is a regular season run from the Pacers that you can get lost by, like, oh, well, it ended up being the 4 seed. 4 seeds historically in the finals. I don't even know if that means anything, but there's not a ton of success from 4 seeds. I don't think it matters. But, the Pacers here in the playoffs, 12-4, the number 2 offense in the playoffs. Cleveland is still actually the number 1 highest rated offense in the playoffs because that Miami series was so gross. Indiana has been the best shooting team. They've been the best assist team. They've been the best 3-point shooting team. OKC is 13th in 3-point shooting, which I mentioned last week. Like, the craziest part of this is that they're one of the few teams that we've seen playoff-wise the last few years, because this defense is so special, that a lot of teams is like, hey, how'd you do in the series? We hit 38% of our threes. We're moving on. They hit 30%. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. OKC doesn't need to make a ton they can have a bad 3-point shooting night and still win a game. That also is a little bit scary. But here's something else. OKC has played faster in the playoffs than the Pacers have. Number 2 to number 3, Memphis is number 1 overall. Turnovers, the Pacers, Halliburton, they take care of the basketball. But OKC's actually been better with the basketball and turnover rate. Indiana's been at number 3. Now, look, I'll say it one more time. Chet didn't play. So it changes the defensive assignments. It changes whether or not the Pacers are going to have anything going with the small ball, because OKC may just say, hey, our small version is just Chet. So have fun with that. Hartenstein minutes, he played less against Minnesota than he did in any of the playoff series, 20 minutes a game, closed the last 3 games at 19, 16, and 17 minutes. He's also 9th in net rating for OKC regulars. You could argue there's 11 regulars for OKC. You could also argue it's really 9. But he's last in net rating. Maybe net rating means something. Maybe it means nothing, but maybe they're playing him less. But if you look at Minnesota and you go, all right, it's this one big who is, Rudy's a different big certainly than Miles Turner is, but does this mean we're going to see more of the same? Or Chet has developed enough and shown up in some of these really big moments, including that closeout game against Minnesota, where now Dagnall's just totally comfortable with him, and that's why we're seeing less Hartenstein minutes. Or is it going to be something where we see less Hartenstein minutes because we saw the Pacers attack him so much, when I'm referencing back to this March game? The other part of this that I think is important, the bench guys from the Pacers staying on this net rating thing, we might be confusing familiarity with success, or we might be using familiarity to suggest that it's successful because we like this Pacers depth. We like all these guys that come in. On the whole, throughout the playoffs, like 4 of them have been net negatives for this team. And I'm not including Tony Bradley, who actually has the best rating of anyone on this team. But Bryant's a negative, TJ's a negative, Obi's a negative. And look, Mathurin has been, I'm disappointed because I really like Mathurin a lot. And I know he had kind of that one wake-up game against the Knicks. But on the whole, now we'd expect, although the free throw attempts are always going to be there because he's so aggressive. But they've got to get a little bit more out of him offensively. And I'm sure he will attack. So there is probably not much from that game where I'm like, all right, I've got it all figured out, because there has to be an element of like what the Pacers have gone through here and the confidence they're feeling. This group has probably never, ever felt before. But the pace part of it, if you are banking on that the Pacers are just going to be able to run the Thunder into the ground, the Thunder can do a lot of things. And that's why I've been so impressed by them all season long. So I think the most important like factor in a lot of this is also, OKC's playing Denver in the second round, playing Minnesota in the third round, and Pacers take out Cleveland, no doubt. Take care of New York, make it look actually kind of one-sided once it's all said and done. But this is a massive step up from what the Pacers went through in the East in facing a team like OKC. So all these numbers can be right, and we can like a lot of these things that the Pacers have done, but there's no denying that it's a massive step up and a challenge. Thunder in 5. The finals are here at last, folks. It's all come down to this. Don't miss your chance to bet on the legendary moments with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is the best place to find all of your favorite player props, and now you can make the smarter play with new performance trends. Want to check a player's consistency during the playoffs, or maybe they've been flirting with a potential triple-double? Get the latest stats right inside the app and see who's heating up. I love the live betting when I'm in the States for it. After the tip-off, that's when things get interesting. You can combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Okay, here's what I'm looking at here. Obviously, I like the Thunder in the series. Minus 750, that is putting a lot on the line for turnaround there. So we're going to stay away from that. Now, if you want to go over-under 5.5 games, I mean, you've heard this all from me before. I can really like a team. I just think human nature kicks into this so often. Boston got destroyed in the one game that they lost. And then it's like the difference between a 5-game series being awful and a 6-game series being really competitive, which again, always kind of odd to me. But I almost never think anybody's going to sweep anybody just because I don't know if it's a thing that's newer now. They can feel newer in the moment where you'll just see pretty quickly like a team is like, we're good and we're not going to try it as hard tonight. So if you wanted to go over 5.5, it's plus 120. Here's what I like. I'm going to try to correctly predict the series order. The most popular one is, well, not the most popular one. The worst payout is just a sweep. So OKC wins game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4 is plus 290. This one is plus 880, where it's game 1 and 2 OKC at home, game 3 OKC, and then they drop game 4 and then close it out at home in game 5. I'm going to go with this one. OKC wins the first 2 at home. Indiana wins game 3. OKC wins game 4 and wins game 5. So that one plays plus 680. That's just going to be my pick for this. It's really hard, but I like the odds of that much better than, laying minus 750, which I don't know, I think is kind of pointless and not what you're coming here for. Is there any deeper meaning in any of this? There is part of me that's thinking OKC, Minnesota a little bit, take care of the first 2 at home. Pacers have a great home crowd. Carlisle, at this point, this is 2 years of pretty deep playoff games for this group. So do they get that one at home because you have a Thunder team that's up 2-0 and they're matching kind of the pattern that we saw against Minnesota? That's not the best way that I've ever put together a bet, but I like plus 680 a lot better than some of the other stuff. Unless you just want to go over 5.5 or under 5.5. Again, that is plus 120 on the over. And it's minus 148 under 4.5. So if you think the Pacers can get 2, but you don't want to bet them for the series, plus 120 actually makes a little bit more sense. And I wouldn't argue against that one. If you don't already have FanDuel, it's not too late to get into the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/Ryen, R-Y-E-N, to join today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or visit rg-help.com. Want to do something different here with the finals tonight. Want to talk some college football with my favorite guy to talk college football with. That's Bruce Feldman of The Athletic. And, of course, Fox coverage of college football, big noon kickoff. Okay, I love the sport. You know that. It's probably why we're close. Every year I'm starting to hate it more and more. And, Van Lathan and I were talking about it the other day on Bill's pod for a little bit. And he goes, you know what? I'm just to the point where I just want to watch, he's a Louisiana guy. He's like, I want to watch LSU, Mississippi State, and just be entertained for 3.5 hours. And I think that's the relationship that I'm going to have to start having with it. But I know that I can't because I talk about it religiously. It's part of the job. But the new proposals, the new playoff stuff, every single year with this shit, Bruce, it just feels like a grosser and grosser sport, and probably will never get gross enough for me to not want to go to a game every single year. And the same deal, watch it all day on Saturday. Yeah, it's a weird relationship for me right now for a sport that's easily my second favorite.
It's interesting because you hear that more and more. I think there was a lot of frustration from the fan bases around the country about they're conflicted about players getting paid, but I think they have also.
I don't care about any of that, by the way.
But there's layers of this,
sure.
And then the part of it's frustration with roster management and guys in the portal, and now somebody's gone to 4 or 5 different programs. Again, it feels more like the professional sports world, and to me the biggest thing that I'm like, I'm not I'm always gonna, I think, love college football. I love the games as much now as I did 30 years ago when I started covering it. But, and I'll give you a reference, and I think you'll get this one because we're about, in the same ballpark age wise. Do you remember when Boston College beats Notre Dame, the David Gordon kick? This is early.
I know where I was. I know I was in my dorm room, 1993 fall, and I used to really like Notre Dame as a little kid because that was kind of a very New England thing that you did because they were always on TV and everybody's dad and grandfathers liked Notre Dame. And David Gordon also played soccer at UVM and transferred. So that was the other story. So I got to tell Lou Holtz that when I saw him, because I went to UVM, and I said, did you know on that kick? And Holtz is eating a hot dog and he's got like a second hot dog ready to go. And we're in the ESPN cafeteria. It's dead on the weekend. And I went up to him. I was like, hey, coach, whatever. I was like, did you know? And as soon as I mentioned the kick, he goes, that kick was outside, came back in, was outside, and it came back in. I mean, you would have thought, clearly the ghost of that whole thing. So then I had mentioned to him he was actually a soccer player where I had gone to school. And then he dropped his hot dog because it made this moment that was that much worse. So yes, that's the long way of saying I remember that kick.
So I remember that game vividly too. And what I remembered as somebody who at the time wasn't really covering the sport. It was a little before I got into the sports writer world. But it felt like that game, it was an upset and a great game by BC, felt like that kind of ruined Notre Dame's season. And so what you
ruined
had, what's that?
Yeah, ruined it.
Yeah. And so it was like the one and done vibe that you had. I always would say college football had the greatest regular season of any of them. I love NFL, I love NBA, but they're much different. They're much different dynamics. College football, because of all sorts of reasons, but mostly because I feel like they're chasing the money and the TV money, has devalued its regular season, and it's going to happen. It's happening more and more. And now if they go to 14 or to 16 team playoff, it absolutely will happen. Right. So you look at the 3 SEC teams that had 3 losses last year that didn't get in. And let's say Indiana, which took the brunt of a lot of the criticism from SEC people and from also people at ESPN in different places, got in because their schedule wasn't as daunting. Now, the part of that I'm getting to is you had Alabama, 3-loss team, loses to Vanderbilt, gets blown out by a really mediocre Oklahoma team. You have Ole Miss, which has a really good win over Georgia, and then turns around. All they have to do is beat Florida, who is unranked and not having a great year, and then beat a terrible Mississippi State team, and you're in the playoff. And they lose to Florida. And on top of that, they had already lost at home to a really bad Kentucky team, probably the worst team in the SEC, and lost to an LSU team that was unfinished, unranked. So the point was, you have these teams that yeah, they're talented teams, but they've stumbled along the way more than once or twice. And so it's like you're saying, okay, the regular season matters, but it doesn't matter that much. That's how I think, it's there's all pieces of it. To me, that's the piece that I think is the one that's the most disappointing, is that the regular season gets devalued. But I get it. For a lot of people, it's these new rivalries. It's the board has been overturned for all sorts of financial reasons. And I get why the frustration is there. But until people push away and stop watching the games, which at this point that we haven't seen that to enough degree, I think that they're just going to be plowing ahead.
So the latest proposal, they've given themselves a deadline. So we're still going to have the same format here in 25, just because the housekeeping part of this almost needs to be updated, especially like when you're out of season. They are going to change the absurd seating thing that we saw in, that's which the part of this where, right. Which, it's really weird the way that they do this, where, when they went from 2 to 4, they went from 2 to 4 because they were annoyed with everybody getting mad at them. And in fairness to whatever the system is, there's going to be pages and pages and hours filled of people complaining about whatever version of this that we get. But they go to 4, where they immediately institute a scenario where one of the Power 5 conferences is going to go, what, when we still had 5 power conferences. Where they're going, why would we set up a system where we're going to immediately leave one of us out? Right. So then we have the expansion to 12, and then they have the seating thing where everybody knew how stupid it was going to be in different scenarios, and yet they go with it, and then they have to have it play out, which is another very human nature thing, where we only get mad about the imperfections when the imperfections play out, not when they hypothetically can still exist. So they're changing that. And so now all of these conversations with the SEC stuff and the scheduling, which I want to get into, is this idea of 5 plus 11. And they have a deadline of December 1st for this year to implement a new 16-team playoff for 26. So what can you tell us about what actually has momentum and how the different scenarios would play out here?
Well, I think what you have is two different kinds of strategies. You have the Big Ten, which had their meetings out here in Southern California about 3 weeks ago, and there was really no public talk about anything. You didn't have the media around it. I mean, Fox is a TV partner, so we were there, but it wasn't like there were press conferences or anything like that. Then a couple of weeks later, you just had the SEC meetings last week in Destin, Florida, where it is covered vigorously. And Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, is out there. And I think, so you have the behind the scenes stuff of Tony Petitti, where there's other things that are going on here also in terms of trying to get more TV games for playing games. Like obviously, the NBA model of how, what they're doing. And now all of a sudden there's going to be an element of that potentially for, coming out of what the Big Ten wants for, again, more TV inventory. And then you have the SEC, which, by the way, only plays 8 conference games as opposed to 9. So not right. The same, but also, do they want their thumb on the scale where it's going to be this many automatic bids? And you don't probably need the automatic bids of the SEC or the Big Ten, because it's going to probably play out that way anyway. But I think all those things, now you have a lot of pushback. Yeah, Greg Sankey, I saw, was on Dan Patrick this week, a few days after the conference meetings, and talking about, allocations and what he wants. And it's honestly, I think for a fan, it's hard to keep track of who wants what. And I do think it is a moving target right now of this. If you're the SEC, and it goes to 16, you're going to get 5 in. The Big Ten, probably you're going to get 4 or 5 in as well. But given the track record they've had, I don't think you can argue that, at that point. It's just who is making the determination. People are always skeptical of the committee and how this stuff worked. You're not going to please everybody. And I would say a few years ago, and look, Florida State was falling apart health-wise. Florida State was undefeated. They get snubbed in the playoff by the CFP when it's 4 teams. So they're expanding, but you're always going to have people aggrieved and upset and feel. And the bigger you make the playoff, the more teams are going to have an argument, to be honest. And I don't know, like last year, if you look at it, I think a lot of people were like, hey, more people are going to be involved. More people are going to have a vested interest in the playoff race. It's going to keep the season more alive, which I think that was true. But it's like, you're squeezing the toothpaste here and it's coming out in different places, or it's just kind of like, it's never going to be perfect. And so what they probably sacrificed for the good of the whole regular season, I think right now it's just a lot of compromise. It's not a lot of compromise. It's a lot of agendas being pushed around. And there's also way more, it's way more transparent. I don't know if transparency, it's way more desperation for the money, because now they need to find more money because of some of the issues we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways we can go here, but if we keep it on the importance of what we saw from last year, I think that the regular season is devalued. When I'm watching Gus and Joel do Ohio State, Michigan, and Gus is saying this is for everything, it isn't. It isn't for everything. As we just saw, Ohio State could lose to Michigan and have it be their second loss.
And they safely got in, by the way.
Yeah, right. And they deserve to be in. And granted, we probably had the right outcome if you want to talk about talent about a football team. But it was a weird feeling watching Ohio State just be upset in a fashion you couldn't imagine with that team. And granted, that rivalry is so intense. Like, we've seen this sport enough. Some weird shit happens in those last weekends of the sport. But after it was done, like, I had an empty feeling as I'm sitting there in my living room going, all right, that was crazy. And how do I want to talk about it? How did it actually happen? And it's like, yeah, they're still in. They're still in, and they're going to have a chance to win a national championship. So you can't ever bill that game as that game meaning everything. I used to love that. Well, I still do, obviously, because I go to it every year. But when Bama and LSU were at the top of their game, that felt like some kind of play-in to the 4-team playoff. However, having said that, you're right. When Bama loses to Oklahoma, that Bama-Oklahoma game means nothing in the old system. Ole Miss's Florida game means nothing. So you're devaluing some stuff while valuing a bunch of other stuff. And you could make an argument that the math would tell you there's way more games that are going to matter at the end because the field is so much more open. I guess I'm just being a bit of a traditionalist in that I don't like these games that meant everything not meaning that much for the loser. And that Ohio State-Michigan game is the perfect example of it.
Well, also, as you're saying that, it dawned on me that, yes, there are games that are relevant for the playoff. But I think if you use the context of, the teams that are, again, and Ohio State was not like a 3 seed, right? They were in the middle of the pack because they lost 2 games and lost to a pretty average Michigan team, with a terrible offense at home, no less, right, at the end of the year. But so some of those games that are meaningful because they mean a playoff spot, but I don't know, and I'm catching myself as I say this because you're sitting there going, all right, but the teams that get in the playoff, do they really have a chance to win a national title, right? And I'm sitting there going, all right, well, Arizona State, who was at the bottom prediction point for the Big 12 a year ago at this time, they almost beat Texas in a playoff game. Like, that was amazing. It's an amazing job for Kenny Dillingham and that group. But, I don't know if they won that game. Did they really have a chance to win the national title? Obviously, they have a mathematical chance, and nobody would have thought they would have gotten as far as they did. So I think you start to factor in those teams that were like, they really don't have a chance. And you start going into these things about like, the roster, makeup of how much talent do they really have? Do those teams have a realistic shot of winning? And I think so what we're doing is we're bringing in the Iowa States and the Arizona States, quite honestly, a lot of Big 12 schools, not to say they're going to get 3 or 4 in, but you're bringing them in where they probably did not have much chance to make the 4-team playoff typically. You're bringing in some other teams that are not the blue bloods. Then now they're factored in. And I think so while their games now probably matter a little more, the other games that we're talking about where it's like just devastation. And I think the Ohio State Michigan thing, because of the Ryan Day component of that, made it different, right? Like how does he go on from this, given all this stuff? There was a fight after the game. It was just a really wild day in Columbus. But typically that gut punch loss, where, I use the David Gordon Notre Dame one. This is a big example for me, obviously a different time, but there's other ones where it's like, okay, that really wasn't a devastating loss to that team's playoff hopes, because they still have a couple more games where they can afford to lose again. And you're like, okay, so that's the part where, as a college football person, that's the one thing that is a little bit, I kind of cringe about. But the thing you have to keep in mind too is these conferences are now so bloated that, like we talked about this a lot around here, because it's a USC Notre Dame rivalry has gotten a lot of chatter. And the truth of it is, USC, if they want, if Lincoln Riley or USC does, is hesitant to play now because they're in the Big Ten, it's a much more daunting path. The reality is they played less ranked teams last year than they did the year before when they were in the Pac-12, or the year before that when they were in the Pac-12. Right. So it wasn't like they had a murderer's row. Now, they had a lot of travel that they had to do, but you're chasing a lot of money to go in the Big Ten. That's why, so it's just a really complicated, there's a lot of stuff that's going together. And I can see why a lot of fans and a lot of people around the sport are a little uncomfortable with it.
So the 9-game part of this, which Big Ten fans never gave the Pac-10 any credit for years. And now they're the 9-game heroes. And I get it. Like, hey, if we're playing 9 games and the SEC is playing 8 and they want 4 automatic bids in a 16-team field, I understand why they're doing it. I understand all the criticism of the SEC playing the 8 games. But if I'm South Carolina's AD and we go to 9 games, the first thing I'm doing is canceling Clemson forever. I'm never playing that game. Nobody's going to sit here and act like Georgia Tech is at Georgia's level, but you never know how cyclical some of this stuff can be. I would never schedule anyone in any Power 5, because whether it was a BCS formula or a selection committee, people have a hard time with thinking the team with the extra loss is better than the team that lucked out on their in-season scheduling stuff. And to the imbalance that you talk about in the expansion of these conferences, it almost feels like Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, is pointing to the history of this, being like, and last year I did not argue Bama. I was arguing South Carolina, then they lose their game. The anti-Indiana argument that I felt really strong about because of how they lucked out with their scheduling. Like it becomes kind of human nature. Like, I don't know. Those other teams have 3 losses. The other losses are late. I don't think Indiana was necessarily better than those teams. And Indiana fans take this really personally because they feel like I was on it all season long. But it's just more, it has nothing to do with Bloomington. It has nothing to do with the school. It has everything to do with their circumstance and then them getting in. And history tells us that team is always going to be favored, even though no one ever really seems to want to dig through the schedule part of it. So if you're playing 9 conference games in the Big Ten versus the 8 in the SEC, it's just hard for the SEC to make their argument for the automatic bids, even though I'm going to sit here and tell you 9 conference games in the SEC is almost always going to be harder than 9 conference games in the Big Ten. I think most sane people would agree with that. It's a really hard argument to get past, to get to some sort of resolution, unless the SEC matches what the Big Ten is doing. Like, if you want the same auto bids as that other conference, even if we sit here and think one conference is better than the other, and it's probably bad timing with the Big Ten winning back-to-back titles of 2 different teams. That's just a hard thing, I think, for Sankey to be able to sell, even if the perception of it would be the right one.
I think because they're out there and they're talking, and he has this dossier that he's handing out to the media who's around.
Yeah, how about that?
Make that case, right? And look, I mean, in full transparency, so Fox is so tied into the Big Ten, and when you do a lot of their games, and I'm not a game broadcaster, but I'm with Big Noon, you see a lot of these teams. You're like, oh, I think they're really good because you see them in person. Or the converse side is like, I saw Nebraska look horrible against Indiana. So you think they're either a lot they're probably look a lot better than they might be, or they look a lot worse than they really are, because you're seeing it up close and you're seeing all the flaws and all that. The flip side is, ESPN is more tied to the SEC than it is to any other conference. And so when those conversations are had, I think people now, because social media is what it is, I think it's a lot easier to poke holes at it, and people can make these arguments and going, no, you guys are biased about the Big Ten. You guys are biased about the SEC. You don't really, that's not the truth. And then I think you can believe whatever you want to believe. I mean, I can sit there and go, Indiana was a really good team who had a terrific year, but the way the schedule broke, I mean, they played two teams that had played in the national title the year before, but neither was anywhere near as good as they were, right? They played Ohio State. They looked good for about a quarter, and then Ohio State just kind of mauled them. But the other part of that is I'm glad you brought up South Carolina as you did, right? But look at Ole Miss's 4 games. I mean, Wake Forest is in there. Wake Forest was awful last year. Everybody they played was bad in the non-conference. So basically, credit to them. They beat Georgia, who is really talented. They beat South Carolina. Now, South Carolina was way different in the end of the year than they were when Ole Miss played them. But again, they did blow them out, and I think that's on their resume. But it's you have these bloated conferences, so the schedules aren't going to be the same. Georgia's schedule was a meat grinder. By the way, they had Clemson at the beginning of the year and they whooped them, right? And but they had all they could do to survive Georgia Tech. And I don't think that was not the Georgia team that was sending 8 guys every year to the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, it was a good Georgia team, but offensively, there was no Bowers, there was no McConkey. So I think it was an interesting year, and I feel like what ends up happening is people tend to overreact to whatever happened that year. It's just kind of the way we are, because there's way less of a sample size.
Yeah, I mean, the bias thing is never going to be gone. As somebody that's lived it, inside of it, outside of it, it is funny to see Fox guys get shit about the Big Ten in the way that we got shit about the SEC with ESPN. I would argue, I think there's times where I think Fox guys are way more pro Big Ten than I ever saw ESPN guys about the SEC. But then you would just throw Herb Street in the Florida State, Alabama argument in my face, and we have all sorts of evidence. I'll tell you one thing ESPN could do is rework the FPI, because there was some conversation from Sankey and others about, do we need to go back to a formula? I didn't think we'd be clamoring for the Big East the BCS calculations. Not a lot of Big East football to talk about. BCS calculations years after, because everybody, look, whatever system you have, to the original point, people are going to be upset about it. But do you want to guess? Because FPI was factored into, I think, some of that media stuff that the SEC, I don't know if you saw it or not.
Yeah, I don't think a formula or metrics is the way to go for college football. I know why it's probably more relevant in other sports, because there's way more of a sample size to it. But I think so much factors into what happened in that game. And teams are different in week 5 than they might be in week 12, in week 10. I think that it's just way different. I know this, when Ole Miss crushed South Carolina, and this is not a knock on Ole Miss, as you play whoever have, but Lenora Sellers, who by the end of the year was one of the best players in college football, but at that point, he had a high ankle sprain coming out of the LSU game. He wasn't the same guy, right? And so that's still a quality win, but I think at the time, you have South Carolina is like a 3-3 team, right? So I just think that however you factor into formulas, it can't tell you a lot of the context that's around those things that I think matters. And I'm not sure that there's going to be no perfect way to do this. That's the the problem with all of it.
Do you want to guess where Bama was at the end of the year in ESPN's FPI?
I will guess 9.
4.
Wow. I guess they really loved that Oklahoma team that was dreadful. 4. Look, there's no bigger
4.
Diego Pavia fan than me, but 4. Wow.
Four felt high. You made a really good point, though. Like, hey, you can sit there and argue if you're the Big Ten and the SEC for the 4 auto bids. And maybe maybe we are in 2 years of a cycle of the Big Ten heading towards not just winning titles, but the deepest conference. I still think that would be surprising to me.
It would be surprising to me also, too. I feel like you get, like, look, I could see maybe Penn State, this is the year that they win it. I'm not predicting it, but it's like they have a lot of talent back. But then where is does that mean USC is going to get going? Washington's like, those programs have been good. Wisconsin has been good. I could see Nebraska getting better, but like I feel like you have depth in the top at the SEC that you don't usually have in the Big Ten. You really haven't had it in a long time. You may have had like 1 or 2 high level programs, but after that, it's like when Wisconsin was good, Michigan wasn't that good, or, like there was just, it just didn't align. And I feel like it's hard for them to build that, because I don't know if they're recruiting from similar pools. So it's like, if this kid's over there, then they don't have it.
Yeah. I've tried to have an open mind about this because, I know all the stuff that I've said over the years and arguing about the SEC. And then you go, okay, well, this is now they're starting to win. You have the 2 different teams win titles. Then you can certainly make arguments for more teams than I could in the past. I think Michigan State at least deserves a mention because of the stuff that they had done years ago. But you're right. You add Oregon, let's see what Washington looks like, whether that was kind of like just a blip or not. If SC can ever get this thing figured out, I don't have a lot of hope for UCLA, but now there's certainly more teams you can pick from. I guess maybe when I have Matt Rule in Nebraska arguing it's clearly the best conference, like that's the thing that'll always be like, dude, what are you doing? Anyway, here's the part where if I would side with the Big Ten part of it is like, if we're playing the 9, whatever you think of the 9 and you're playing the 8, why do you get 4 auto bids? If we're getting 4 auto bids, I do like your point though of like, hey, look, you're probably going to get your 4 and another one with the 4 + 4, 2 + 2 with the Big 12 and the ACC, the 1 to the conference champ outside of those power groups, and then the 3 at large. You're probably still going to get your 4 and 5. So why would you get in the way of all of this stuff? Yeah, that actually, like, there's a lot of common sense, but I can also understand them saying like, we want this thing in writing. And the thing that's crazy is I was reading this morning is that there's a bit of an understanding already that the Big Ten and the SEC were going to be able to dictate some of this stuff, some memo of understanding. Right.
Yeah, they're at the top. They're driving the money. I think that's absolutely on point. The part that, you sit there and take a breath on, it's like, all right, let's say we get to 16. It's not 16 out of like 135 or whatever the number is of FBS programs. It's more like 16 out of like 50 or so. You
could probably make it smaller than that too, right?
Because now we're weeding out some of the bottom of the ACC but out of those 4 power leagues, you basically, you don't even have to have that good of a year to make it out of the SEC. If and when it does go to 16, I think that's the part where like, and we need to be conditioned probably to like, what, you're a playoff team, but that didn't mean that much. Now if you win a couple of games in the playoff, different story. It certainly means a lot to Indiana because of what their history's been like to make the playoff. But I think for other teams, like I would argue last year, like, so Notre Dame had been in the playoff. Brian Kelly had some excellent teams. Last year, they won games, right? They beat Georgia. They were, like, huge for Marcus Freeman. Not only did they beat Georgia, I think he outcoached Kirby Smart on that stage. What did they win? 17-6. Like, I think for Notre Dame, it wasn't just getting, we'd seen them in a title game. They got embarrassed, right, by Alabama, in Miami, whatever it was, 12 years ago. But last year, we saw them have really impressive wins along the way. Not just beating Indiana, but, beyond that, I think to get to where they got to said something. But just to get in the playoff now for a lot of these teams, if it does get to that point, I feel like you're going to get kind of a shoulder shrug from it. I don't think last year for anybody from Georgia was like, oh, that was a really good year for them. And once you get to 16, it's going to be even less likely for them, unless the team that makes the playoff from the SEC is Vanderbilt. Other than that, like if you're any of those other teams, so what? We won national titles, or we won, whatever. Like, I don't even know for Ole Miss, if they get in, that at 16, unless they're like a top 4 seed and they go on to win the playoff. I don't think it's going to be like a year where they'll be like, over the moon about.
I guess I just want to avoid any scenario. Like, I'm looking at a couple ACC schedules here, and this is stupid to do in the beginning of June. But like, if you looked at Pitt, and they played Duquesne, Central Michigan, they've got West Virginia. What if they were to lose at Florida State, lose to Notre Dame? They're 10-2, and it's like, okay, well, they're 10-2, and they're still from a power conference, and they have to get in. And like, this has nothing to do with Pitt, so I'm not making personal about Pitt. I'm just trying to run through a conference where you go.
Thing is buggy, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have TJ McCollum on the brain or something or whatever. So I get it. Like, you would sit there.
That's the part of 16 where then you start hearing arguments from like a group. I'm like, I haven't seen you do anything against, like, say maybe they're close wins or close wins by, understand what I'm saying. Florida State, it's a field goal. Notre Dame, they're right into the fourth quarter. I mean, this is stupid that I'm even doing this out loud, but that's the scenario that I despise, is that then that team, and then, all that kind of stuff. Like Bielema's on this heater right now about the Illini. And it's like, yeah, it's a bit like the Lane Kiffin playbook here. Just keep doing stuff, and you're getting that attention and everything. And their bowl game win was incredible.
Against a good team. Yeah, it was a fun game to watch. There was a lot of venom in it, and they beat the team that South Carolina just beat in Clemson and was rolling down the stretch. I think that's a good win. And I think he is mindful of, hey, we are coming off of, Illinois doesn't normally do this. I got most of my guys back. I got my quarterback back. And I think he is putting them right out in front for people, so people can say, hey, let's keep an eye on Illinois, and they're going to be on the radar. So they don't get, if they go 9-3 or 10-2, if they're 10-2, I think it's a hard argument for a Big Ten team not to make it in. But because it's not like Miami, right, where last year they had just bad losses. You're up by 21 to Syracuse, you lose, you cost it, and then you just kind of have yourself to blame on it. But I think if you're Illinois and you're sitting there at 10-2, you're in good shape. If you're 9-3, I don't know if that's what you're planting the seed for.
Okay, so is there anything? It sounds like it's just inevitable anyway, so it doesn't really matter, because I saw some of the conversation of like, can you sign off on this if you're running the Big 12 or the ACC? And it's like, it sounds like they kind of already did. What choice do you have, though?
I think,
right?
I don't know what choice they're going to have in the end when the money is such, and those what I don't see the threat of is, the Big Ten and the SEC are just going to at some point just say, hey, we're done. We're going over here. You guys can, play whatever we want to call it. It's not 1AA football anymore, but it's like, it ain't going to be the national title if the Big Ten and the SEC aren't involved. You can do what UCF did when Scott Frost was there, but no one outside your fan base is going to take it seriously. Right. So I think where we're looking at this and going, man, does the Big 12 and ACC really have much leverage here? I'm interested to see how that will play out.
Yeah. Well, look, it's all happening, and there's no point in getting I'm still going to watch on Saturdays, but between the expansion and then changing this over and over again, I wouldn't say it's going in a direction. I don't enjoy these annual updates and changes to this, and I really don't like where it's going. And I think eventually when we lose even more and more rivalries that have been around for what feels like a century, I'm wondering if there's just a series of smaller time frame decisions being made where maybe you're sacrificing the long-term vision, but the television deals would tell you nobody's worried about that right now. Freaks list. We look forward to it every year, where you go through the freaks of college football, what they're accomplishing athletically, what coaching staffs tell you about some of their guys. What is going on with that piece as we all await it?
So it used to be in the middle of the summer, and now in the portal era, I've had to rethink it and bump it back into early August. And why that is is I had a conversation with one group of 5 head coach who was like, I got a guy, and like, when I tell you the numbers, you're not going to believe it, but when is this thing running? And I said, well, I told him, and he goes, here's what I worry about is if you put this stuff out there, he worried that somebody was going to poach his player. And so, we kind of slid it further back. And now that's the date is in that point where no one's getting poached at that point. By the way, the crazy thing is that player ended up doing exactly the same numbers that, at the combine that he had told me, which I was like, there's no way a 6'4" cornerback is running that, jumping that. So, but he does, and now he plays for the Seahawks, right? And so those kinds of guys, like a little off the grid, a little off the radar, have been what's been the coolest part about Freaks List. And because of that, I think, and because so many guys end up in the portal and get poached, that it just makes sense to run it into August.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Oh,
okay. All right.
Tariq the Freak was like at UTSA, and I'd heard a little about him from the previous staff, but just when Jeff Traylor had told me about him was just kind of, are you serious? And obviously people at the combine saw, yeah, they were serious.
So you're telling me now there's a guy that you were talking about, and then the coach was like, no. So we have to, the Freaks List is delayed because of the transfer portal.
It's been delayed for the last couple of years. I've moved it back because of that. So it just made more sense to run it then.
What else? Yeah, you're right. I know. I lose track of all this stuff. What do you have coming up?
I have a cool story on the 25th anniversary of when Washington beat the Miami team that ended up becoming, the greatest team of, it was supposed to be all time in college football, and kind of that rivalry. And it's a fun story. I was not planning on doing the story. I started out by calling Rick Neuheisel to ask him about Terrell Suggs, the great Ravens and Arizona State pass rusher. And so we got to talking about him. It was for like a top 25 players of all time. And I was like, all right, I got to find some people to talk about Suggs who can, give me some insight. And somehow we got to talking about when Washington beat that Miami team, and Neuheisel had some great stories. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? It's the 25th anniversary of this thing. I ought to write about this. So that's a story that's coming out later this week. And I have a story on a few other things I'm excited about. One, I don't want to tip my hand too much on, but it's a really cool story on a guy that I didn't know much about. He's going to blow up this summer, already has to some degree, but just has a really cool backstory. And so I'm excited about that.
All right. Looks good. Check those out on The Athletic. Bruce Feldman, always good. See you soon.
Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. When I get into something, I go deep, like seeing how I can improve my sleep routine or finding a TV show that I can get lost in. Prime helps me find everything I need, plus offering fast, free delivery. Whatever it is, Prime helps you get more out of whatever passions you're into or getting into. Head to Amazon.com/Prime and follow your obsession wherever it goes.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
Life advice, rr@gmail.com. We've got Wargon. We've got Kyle.
Yo.
It's good to see you.
Likewise.
All right. Okay, great. A little cleanup here. Let's just start here. I actually called Kyle. Doesn't happen a lot. And I don't know what it was. I think it was Saturday night, just kind of grinding tape, on that grind. I was doing draft prep, and I was going through emails because I was like, I have a little downtime, so maybe I'll go through some emails here, really sort through all of these. And Wargon, when we were talking about just accepted like accomplishments in fitness, and we were talking about a mile time.
Sure.
Did you think we were talking about mile split times for long distance running, or just?
I thought we were talking about 1 mile.
We were.
That's what we were. Yeah, because we were. It's exactly what we were doing.
You were comparing it to 20 push-ups.
I still think
20 push-ups was thrown out.
Well, he was just saying, what is something that you would consider like kind of impressive, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It was sort of like,
I guess I don't run that. I don't know anyone who just does 1 mile. I feel like it's like a specific thing that like, if you're going to do it, you're going to train for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So just to be clear, because sometimes this will happen where we'll talk about it. And then I know that I can have a habit of just kind of like just steamrolling it in a way where maybe I'm not hearing everything that you're saying. I'm trying to be a better listener. And this reminds me a bit of, because we had a lot of feedback to this, being like 6 minute mile, are you out of your mind? Like all these different things. And I'm thinking, no, like if you just decided that you were going to be a guy that works out or whatever, and then just decided to see how fast you could run 1 mile, no one would ever go, hey guys, broke 8 minutes. Okay. I also ran the mile in high school. So I think I have a little understanding, even though that was a very long time ago, of what you were kind of aiming for and what would be considered. I mean, that's a whole different level when you're actually just competing and running in mile races. But if you were just, say, a guy who's in good shape, 40 years old, hey, I want to see how fast I can run a mile, no one would ever be like, work on Monday going, hey, check out your boy, 7:52. Now, mile splits, that's entirely different. But I think a lot of times what we notice with the show, and this happens for anybody doing any kind of content, is like some people just kind of hear something and then it's not really what it reminds me a lot of standing up in the aisle in the airplane thing. Where
that's
once
how he
I said
with
that,
this phone call to me.
right. Because once,
like, oh no,
once
you're
I
upset.
said, because if you have the aisle, guess what, folks? Eventually you have to stand up. And if you're on, I know I took a Southwest flight because it's the best way to go to Chicago from LA. So you end up in Midway and not O'Hare. And it was my first Southwest experience in a long time. And I'll say this, maybe I shouldn't, but some of you are taking advantage of the assistance in boarding. Some of you.
Uh-oh.
You know who you are.
You picking your seats on Southwest yet? Where are we at on that?
No. But you just, you get a, you know,
No, they're
I put
changing
myself, oh really? I put myself
Yeah.
A1 to 15. I pay the $20.
I
I'll
pay
give
it.
a chance.
Right. And then I
think
still
that's going
almost
away.
missed it. Well, it's chaos. And I noticed when I board, I was like, we're going like 25 deep with people that need help. And some people definitely need the help. And some people don't. And then when I saw people getting help off, and then you would see them like later over at baggage claim, you're just like, you're a fraud. Don't need help now, do you?
I would say you're one thing. Sometimes you got to stand in the aisle just to stop the guy who's going to create the chaos by trying to jump,
Right,
5 rows. And it's like, it's better if I just save my place right here.
Right. And a long distance, if you're going 5 hours on a flight, like getting to stand up, not cutting ahead of the other aisles, but standing up at some point. So that turned into like
Shout out to my
every time
6-footers out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody that's now, anytime anything happens on a plane, people just send it to me nonstop. So we got this
great.
email. 2 dudes whose cardio consists of walking around a golf course saying a 6-minute mile is what regular guys run is crazy, especially when you're trying to connect to an actual runner or when you're trying to correct an actual runner. That would be Wargon, who
I'm
says
also
it's
not
8
an
minutes.
actual runner. I don't want that title on me.
You are, though. You
Buddy,
flew
Disney
to
World?
Florida
Come
for
on.
a marathon. That's a runner in my book.
Half.
Right. Last sentence. I enjoy the show, but that estimate of a regular guy was egregious. That one just, it hit me wrong.
I was
enjoy
confused
the
if
show.
we're training for this or if it's like getting off the couch, doing it, and it's like good.
I think he's thinking of us correcting you on splits, is what
Okay.
I'm saying. Like,
Gotta
no
be.
one should ever, I don't think I'm wrong here. No one should ever be like saying, let me see how fast I can run a mile, and then being excited about 8 minutes. In a split, of course, but that's not
I don't
what
know.
we're
I
talking
think
about.
I don't know. I feel like if I ran that, because I haven't run it. Like, do you guys know what you would run a mile tomorrow?
Oh, God.
One, I
have
could
no
probably
idea.
do like, 10 if I'm being,
Right. So you'd be pretty excited if you did under 8.
but I wouldn't tell anyone.
No, I wouldn't.
I wish I didn't even
No, I
say
wouldn't.
this right now. You know what I'm saying?
But here's the thing, like if you're kind of like a decent sized guy, but you've never ever done a bench press,
Right.
and then you sat down and repped out 135, and your body would be like, what the hell is this? Right. Without any training, you wouldn't be going, Well, banged out 135, guys.
Post.
Nobody would care. Now that guy, if he wanted to say like, all right, I want to get into this and see if I can actually do this. And I think they did get the cardio stuff. Maybe we can do more Muay Thai updates for this guy.
Yeah, he might have nailed me.
Yeah. Yeah, but who knows? That blade training is right around the corner. So that's what I felt like happened there. And there was so much response to it as if we were shitting on a 7:30 marathon split. It's just not really what we were doing. But you're right. Like, I don't know how many people are even out there that run, just go like, I just to see how fast I can go on a mile. I actually used to do it on the treadmill all the time to see how long I could keep it at 10 for as long as I possibly could. I stopped doing that. All right. Bald spot shaming. What's up, fellas? 44, 5'10", 225, do CrossFit 4 to 5 times a week. I'm in the 1200 club, deadlift, squat, shoulder press. Huh. Interesting. No bench in that. But that's impressive. Player comp. I'm like Prime Westbrook if he was a middle-aged white guy with arthritic knees. My problem is this. I like to get my haircut at a national chain place that lets you check in on their app and keeps your haircut specs on file. I'm sure you can guess which one. I actually cannot. This makes things very convenient and fairly inexpensive. Now, here's the issue. In my mid-30s, my hair really started to thin out, especially on the crown.
Monk's cap.
There you go. I think one time on a radio show, they called it a fleshy yarmulke.
Oh, yeah. That was the other one I had in the chamber. I didn't want to say that one.
I'll tell you what, that stunk. When I was 27, 28, that didn't feel great.
Sorry, man.
No one cares about your feelings when you're in shape. It also got really patchy, so I made my peace with it one day and shaved the whole dome. Unfortunately, I do not have a good shaved head, a bunch of scars and weird folds. So in a last ditch before hair plugs, I did the Rogaine Propecia combo, and it worked pretty well. All right. I heard the Propecia thing does actually get it done. I would tell you, as many of you already know, my relationship with Rogaine foam was not successful. From the front, it looks great, but I still have the crop circle bald patch on the crown. I do love when Rogaine foam pivoted from your hair comes back to, hey, everyone should use this. Like if you're 22 and you don't want to be depressed, just use it.
It's like indulgences for the Catholic Church back in the day.
Like, hey, the science says this isn't really working. Hey, let's use it. Let's market it as preventative so everybody buys it. The thing is, when I'm getting my hair cut there, about half the time I end up getting the same woman. Every time I end up with her, she tries to push their in-store hair regrowth products. When I tell her I'm ready, I'm already using some, but thanks, she says these are better, even though they're the same products with different names. Let's just say there's a language culture barrier that I think she knows gives her cloud cover to bust my balls about my bald spot. Even so, as far as laughing at the fact that I did not care to look at the back of my head when they do the show the back of the neck thing at the end. I know it's there, but when I get a direct look at it, it will seriously fuck my whole morning. Hey, man, I hear you, right? This is me just Robin Williamsing you as Matt Damon holding your arm, telling you it's not your fault. When you go in, you don't really get a choice on who cuts your hair, and she works every Saturday, the only day I have time, so it's not that big of a deal. I'd rather that than go to another part of town to avoid it. When I get her again, should I offer a tip up front to try not to sell me anything? Be nice to me, hint, hint, or should I just grin and bear it? Patchy, signed Patchy. Yeah, I think everything should be on the table because for whatever reason, like if you called somebody overweight, you'd be fat shaming. As somebody that was like incredibly skinny, we had no movement. No parents pulled anyone aside and said, don't call the skinny kids skinny. And I do think as somebody that was, had a pretty egregious bald spot and was on television for a long time, there was no movement. There was no like, hey, early bald patch rights for guys that are on TV. I don't remember that there was any coalition
no caucus for you guys.
Yeah. So I'm just telling you as somebody who's part of your constituency here, I think you just go for it. Like just tell her mustache looks good. Like, hey, that's really coming in.
Maybe she's using the stuff that goes on your head.
Yeah, who knows? Like, hey, did you get Rogaine foam on your lip? Like, what's going on there? And look, it's going to be just a relationship ender. But I think the guys out there that have taken shit for this for such a long time, I think you just got to come right over the top of the nukes. And yeah, you may have to go somewhere else. Maybe she'll never pick you again. But I think there need to be consequences for people being a little too comfortable with something. Now, it's fine. Like, maybe we could just all make fun of each other for everything. That might be a solution to all of this stuff. But I think there's an imbalance out there in the world on what people are allowed to say to you when you're losing your hair, and you're supposed to just sit there and take it. And I'll tell you, if you're a certain age, to our emailer's point here, it can really set you back for a few hours.
That felt personal.
It was. I had a mirror in the shitty apartment in Boston that was one of those, folding mirrors to the sides. I mean, the amount of time I studied back there with turning one in against the other and just Indiana Jones in it, like going, what the fuck? So,
God damn it.
Yeah. So you two shaggy headed fuckers, just be happy. Next time you're having a bad afternoon, like, it could be worse. So, yeah, I mean, I know that sounds really mean, and maybe she doesn't have a mustache, but I don't like people's comfort level. Because trust me, those of us that have gone through it, we're aware. We know. And we don't need you fucking reminding us all the time.
Good night, everybody. Now, I feel like I feel like you should just get a guy. Just get like a bar. I mean, maybe it sounds like he likes
guys can be mean too.
No, I just mean get
women are meaner
guy.
about this though.
Get
Women are
your
definitely
guy.
meaner
I mean,
about
like
this.
get your barber, which might make it a little more inconvenient when he's like, I like being able to just walk in, but this thing is screwing up your day, man. Maybe you just find a barber. I mean, I'd rather go to like a mom and pop shop anyway than like a Supercuts where it's just like luck of the draw. I mean, I don't know. I would maybe just find an actual barber. Support a small business, man. They'll take care of you a little better anyway.
Yeah, to Kyle's point, I got a guy. I probably pay a little bit more than I would at like a Supercuts or a place like that. But I go in, he says, "How you doing?" I say, "Good," and he cuts my hair. We don't say another word. He knows exactly how I want it. Don't talk at all. It's exactly what I want.
Yeah, do yourself a favor. Find a guy. Search. Do a little search. Get out of the big hair game.
Exactly. I love that you guys are pro small business. I love
you got
that
a guy, or you just
yes. I don't. Yeah, you were looking at him.
Nice.
And he's harder on me than anybody. Kyle's losing it right now. All right. We also had we had a lot of feedback to $35 guy.
Oh, I'm interested to hear this.
Everyone hates you, man. There wasn't one
really?
emailer, that took the guy's side that was owed the $35. So maybe chill out a little bit.
Wow. There's not even like some hardcore, principles of fantasy sports guys out there.
Nope.
No
there were
one,
slurs.
He took it too
Threats and
far.
Slurs. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap. I was still on the fence a little bit. I'm still on the fence.
I can't even
Maybe
read
because
them.
he's a listener, but
yeah. No, we like to be nice to the listeners, but we like to be honest too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Another one here. If I had your height, man, 23 years old, 6'6", 210, bench 245, squat 325, pickup comp, Mason Plumlee, big that can fill some minutes and show some flashes of razzle dazzle. I feel like razzle dazzle's on the way back. Somebody said it in a movie. I think it was good. Worked. Dear Ryan and guys, I've been out of college for a little over a year, but back during one of my summers home, I worked construction to earn some extra cash to buy an engagement ring for my then girlfriend. Well, it sounds
salt of the earth right there, dude. Way to do that.
That's an awesome spend all summer to prove that you like somebody. Rye smiles, no audio. The guys I work with were great most of the time, but there was one oddball that I was often paired up with for random tasks. We'll call him Brandon. He was in his mid to late 30s and always had some strange things to say, one of them being, quote, if he had my height, he would have for sure made the NBA. This wouldn't have bothered me much, as I hear variations of the comment, often given my height, but his insistence upon the fact, irritating to say the least, this fact, irritating to say the least, is someone being implicitly accused of wasting their physical gifts.
Should we guess how tall this guy is before you give away the height?
He's 6'6".
Okay,
no. He's talking about.
I was going to say, should we guess it before
the
you
Uncle
gave it
Rico
away?
guy who's saying what he
You're
would have
good.
done.
You're good.
How much you want?
I don't know that we have
a football over the mountains.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we have that info. I'm scanning ahead here. We do. We do have it. Very, very good, Wargon. Okay. Do you want to guess his height?
5'11" and 3/4.
Okay, Wargon.
No, I think he's closer to my height, like 5'8".
Oh,
yeah, but you're a sturdy 5'8".
in a good way, like good sturdy.
Yeah. When I saw you come to my house, I was like, this guy's fucking sturdy kid. It's like Jalen Brunson. All right, I do have his height here, so I'll give it to you in a second. But I've kind of mangled this sentence here. I hear variations of this comment, often given my height, but his insistence upon this fact, irritating to say the least, is someone being implicitly accused of wasting their physical gifts, which wouldn't be entirely inaccurate, but that doesn't mean I have to enjoy it. An added layer to this is that Brandon was about 6'4".
oh my God.
So not too far off from me, and his reasoning was that he was able to dunk already, and that his coach just hated him, so he couldn't get playing time. Hey, I know that.
Coach hated me. Yeah,
I might take Brandon's side. Coach fucked me. Some more elements of Brandon and his hobbies include songwriting, rapping. He would often insist. Do you want this guy's contact, Kyle?
No, I'm good.
He would often insist on showing me some of his work by serenading me in the truck on the way to sites. I've included one such occurrence in a video attached to this email. Oh, man, I didn't even see that. Playing in an 11-on-11 tackle football men's league on the weekends. Dude, this guy's kind of awesome. And he raps. And trying to pick up college girls at local bars. I'm going to lay out. Looking back now, I realize I should have messed with him a little bit more, given all the time we had driving in the box truck together. My question is, how would you have all played off a coworker like this, and what would have been the best way to get into his head? Thanks, love the pod. He's 6'4". I mean, that would have been a good place to start.
6'4" is pretty tall. It's pretty big.
Yeah, this is just construction site. This is just fire away any joke that pops into your head. I mean, this is like Monday morning quarterback for life. It's like it's insane. It's insane. And the fact that it's a 2-inch difference is like, I don't know, probably some jokes that you can't say on a respectable pod like this, but I mean, it would be like construction site jokes. That's ridiculous. I feel like everyone would need to know he said that to me.
Look, as somebody who spent plenty of time on sites and in these trucks on the way to another site, there are a lot of conversations that you will hear. And I don't mean this to be offensive, but I don't know with all of the conversations that I've experienced. There's a lot of lessons that I keep with me today, but like peak conversation. I mean, honestly, sometimes like the realness of it and the truth and just kind of cutting through everything. Although when one guy reenacted a sexual act that he had received from a woman that he had cheated on his wife with the weekend before, and then happened to do it right as the homeowner was in the other side of the property because we were putting on an addition. That was a low point. That wasn't great. Luckily I was lowest on the totem pole, so it didn't really matter. It wasn't going to be my problem, but there was tension in the air, I would say, the rest of that day on the site.
I feel like anytime this guy screws anything up, be like, man, if you just had that extra 2 inches, who knows? Who knows, man? Anything that goes wrong. Man, if Mike was just 2 inches taller, we'd be done already.
That would be good.
That's good.
That would be really good. Like, you need a ladder for that? Oh, that's right. You're 6'4".
Yes.
Just everything possible. Like, hey, can you get to the end of that? All right, hold on. We got to wait. He's only 6'4".
Yeah.
I mean, you could have just said some like real basketball stuff and be like, okay, fine. Like, have it out with him. Like, entertain it in a serious fashion, because clearly my guess is the emailer was smarter than the 6'4" guy. So he didn't want to entertain this stuff as much. But if he just had it out, I'm like, okay, let's break it down. All right, so coach fucks you, but if you're 6'6", you're in the NBA. You're 6'4", and you're here with me right now. So like, let's figure out where that gap
what
is.
Happens
right. Like, why aren't you in the G League?
You're in Serbia?
Yeah. Or start like just sending him different teams, like Turkish lowest division.
Yeah, you're just like,
nah.
there's a tryout. There's a tryout. You got to start somewhere.
I see you in the Greek league.
Another truth about the experience on sites is, even though a lot of times you're outside, and there's something to be said of like the accomplishment of building something and working with your hands and the physical strain. Those are things that I miss until I realize, like, you don't miss it that much.
Yeah,
okay?
you're waking up at 5 and you're like, my back, holy fuck.
Yeah. Like you're up on a ladder
in 5 minutes.
The wind whipping, and you're like, is this thing even stable right now? And you're kind of like, is this where it's all going to go down?
Greg's not locked in. What the fuck?
Yeah. You hold on to a 2x12. You're trying to get a nail tacked into it. And you're just like, this actually might suck. So I definitely romanticize those days, or maybe I just like the gear. But no one really wants to be there. So there is a lot of hypotheticals. Like I just always remember, like, everybody was a year away or a few months away. There's just big dreamers, man. Barstools and dreamers. There's a lot of dreamers on a site. And so I think if you remember that with the people that you're interacting with, and, you can engage, some people have an incredible skill to engage stuff that they're not interested in. I was not one of those people. I probably am even worse at it now, but that's really what this guy is all about. Like, I know this guy without ever meeting him. He just thinks like something very soon is going to break for him. And in some weird way, it makes him feel better. And the fact that you're just annoyed and not seriously offended is a credit to you, because once you understand his whole thing, I mean, this guy's out there tackling other men on the weekends. He's writing rhymes. He's singing to you, hoping you're like, dude, you're really good. You should go for it.
Just needs a little bit of praise.
That's all he's
Go
looking
a long
for.
way.
Right.
Dude, the coach hated me is the most classic one ever. I love it's like a ginger ale on an airplane. It's just classic. It's perfect.
Anything to add to this? Is a ginger ale the perfect drink on an airplane?
Especially because Delta uses Seagram's, which I think is the best ginger ale.
Oh.
Can't even find that in half the grocery stores around here. I got to go to Total Wine and more to get my Seagram's. So it's Canada Dry and Schweppes.
You're a special order ginger ale guy.
Oh, yes. Love it. It's not as sweet as the other two, which is perfect.
More medicinal?
Yeah, honestly, it feels that way. Chicken soup for the soul,
The ting of Canada. All right, that'll do it for the show today. Thanks to Wargon. Thanks to Kyle. Thanks to Jonathan Frias. You can check us out as a video podcast now on the app. I think we'll do a Friday feedback next week. So FridayFeedbackRR@gmail.com. You got to be hard on us. You got to be hard on us. So we'll share it all. That'll do it for the pod today. Thank you for listening. Ryen Russillo, Ringer Spotify.
They were going to name me Michael Jordan. My dad was like, I don't think he can live up to it. So they named me Michael Jared.
Must be 21 and older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is there. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.